Malta's appeal to investors nosedives since grey listing. Shots fired as Bernard Gregg delivers budget speech. Caruana Galizia murder suspect awarded €10,000 in damages. All this and more on Lovin Daily. Good evening and welcome to Lovin Daily. I'm Diacono, joined today by Julian Bonnici. And today EY has published a pretty damning report indicative of what investors think of the country following Malta's grey listing by the FATF. Ju, what can you tell us about this report?
Yes, no, actually some really worrying findings. Malta's grey listing by the FATF has actually clearly harmed the country's appeal to international investors in quite a big way. So as Tim said, a new study by EY found that only 37% of investors view Malta as an attractive jurisdiction, down significantly from the 62% recorded last year. This last year's figures was an all-time low, so this is even worse. Meanwhile, around 46% of investors believe Malta is not attractive at all, practically double from the 25% registered last year. This is the first ever EY Malta Attractiveness Survey where foreign investors actually rated Malta as unattractive than attractive, so actually a really worrying set of figures over there. So the actual survey itself, spoke to around 110 companies, that basically focus on foreign direct investment. So it's actually a really big indication of what the sentiment is out there. For those of you who don't know grey listing, it's people really need to read up about it. It's affecting Malta's finances in a big way, so make sure you read all you can about it. So when it comes to why the investors don't find Malta as attractive, about 84% of them said that grey listing is an issue that leading to reputational damage, while 55% said it's going to make doing business in Malta much harder. Meanwhile, another issue that remains is Malta's corporate taxation. At the moment it remains top of the list for reasons why foreign investors are coming to Malta, with about 67% of respondents saying it was the most important thing, followed by telecoms and infrastructure and the stability of the social climate. Obviously, this is really important amid discussions on probably introducing a harmonized tax rate in the world. OECD has proposed 15%, so actually could mean quite a lot for Malta. However, on a positive note, despite maybe all the issues about Malta's attractiveness at the moment, 77% of companies in Malta still believe their long-term future lies in the country. So no immediate alarm bells for these companies flooding out of Malta. However, it should be noted that 15% do see their future elsewhere, so there is that number that is growing, that hey, people are starting to consider other jurisdictions besides Malta to operate. When it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic, which we've actually seen has affected quite a few people, it seems that the outlook is positive for the next year, with at least 50% expecting to make a full recovery by then. Worrying, but somehow positive numbers still in there. Tim, what do you think about it all?
Well, I think it shows very clearly that trying to play down the situation isn't going to work, because even if it might not, because the problem is it's not when grey listing happened, you don't feel the impact straight away, right? It seems more like a war of attrition in a sense. But when you see these numbers and you realize that when the reality is, if a business is going to choose which country to invest in, they're going to look at a number of issues. Being grey listed is going to be one of them, definitely. So the only one, but it's going to be it's going to be a big one. So even if the current companies don't move, because moving to another country is a big commitment, if new ones don't turn up, and they might go to another country in Europe, which isn't grey listed, it's a huge problem for us. And actually, it brings us on to the next story, which is Bernard Gregg's speech in Parliament last night, which brought this issue up repeatedly. So throughout his speech, he kept making it a point to say, we're grey listed and it's your fault, and that was the main narrative of it. And he tried to, for probably the first time, deliver something resembling a vision for the country under his leadership as eventual Prime Minister, if which isn't going to happen, but if the people vote for it. His argument is he wants to reduce several taxes across the board, VAT, company profits, taxations go down, lots of freebies, so free holidays free travel vouchers for everyone, for every single youth in Malta, which I think is a great idea, and a state guarantee fund to help young people put down a deposit on a property, and obviously knowing that the market is so expensive. So the proposals sounded great, to be honest. I think it was a bit of a breath of fresh air to hear an opposition leader's budget speech, not just complaining that the pension didn't go up by 10 euros instead of 5. I think we need to mature a little bit beyond that, but to actually come up with proper ideas. The big problem, as I see it, is where's the money coming from, right? So the opposition recently found out, is making a big fuss about the fact that Malta's debt has exploded. They're not mentioning it, but it's a fact that it's because of the pandemic restrictions that, we decided to impose several restrictions on the economy, and now we're having to pay the price for it. It was always going to happen. And now they're saying, look, we're proposing measures that will increase the debt, right? That's the funny thing about it, right? If you're going to give every youth 500 euros in the travel vouchers, you will increase the debt. And their promise to regain the money is a bit of a funny one, because they're saying we want to attract Facebook, we want to attract Google, we want to attract Amazon, as though you can just bring them over, and the money will come from the taxes that they pay, which is great if it happens, but it's a bit overly optimistic, right?
Yeah,
Maybe it's time to be a bit more feet on the ground instead of just promising the world to people.
Yeah, no, I agree with quite a lot of things you said. I just find, there's almost two ideas here, right? They're talking about, increasing teacher salaries by 25%, even though education, we're one of the biggest spenders in the EU on that field. They're talking about increasing nurses' salaries by 25%. But then, in the other breath, we're cancelling all these taxes and reducing all these taxes, And as well, I think the PN needs to keep in mind that Malta is an incredibly social state, right? From whether it's healthcare, from whether it's housing, we have a lot of social benefits, in this country. Somehow they're going to have to be maintained, and I think there needs to be some solutions, at least when you're proposing a vision for the country and how you're going to solve this. Another point I just wanted to address, as much as it was nice sort of seeing some sort of vision from Bernard Gregg for the country again, things like lowering taxes, increasing salaries, sometimes I find it a bit obvious, some maybe of these proposals, and I wish after, almost a decade and a half in opposition, the PN would actually start presenting, an alternative government, a different future. We saw things like the environment maybe not pushed that much, in the initial budget. So I think it's really important to start addressing the issues a bit stronger.
Though, because no party is going to really tackle or say something that will mean, even if it's in the short term, people earning less money, they're not going to do it. Yeah. So actually they have to compete with each other for how much money you can give people, even as unsustainable as it may be, but...
No, yes, that's true, but again, they are almost 40,000 to 50,000 votes behind. What can they lose at this point, and trying something different to at least offer an opposition?
That is true.
On to our next story. Daphne Caruana Galizia murder suspect George de Giorgio has been awarded 10,000 euros in damages after a court found his right to privacy was breached when his phone was tapped without proper authorization. So De Giorgio had filed the case to call for compensation after he found out that the Malta Security Services had tapped his phone. So a warrant was actually issued in February 2017 to wiretap De Giorgio's phone. However, this was a few months before Daphne Caruana Galizia's had expired, and the warrant's timing didn't really continue on until after Daphne's murder, right? As in the there's an issue over here with Judge Tony Abela raised that the MSS were essentially continuing to spy on De Giorgio well after the warrant expired and well after their rights to do so had done. What this means is George De Giorgio, who at the moment, is charged with the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia, has actually walked away with €10,000 from it, as in it's... I mean, the outrage on social media has been clear. I mean, ridiculous, if I'm quite honest, to see the state giving that kind of money away. I know we all got a tax refund recently, but that means nothing when the state is giving out €10,000 to someone like George De Giorgio, who at least testimony in court has suggested is a career criminal, right? And here we are seeing our courts give him money over a mistake by really authorities we really should trust, and should know how to wiretap, because really and truly, who knows whose expired warrants they're still using to wiretap certain people, I mean, really answers need to be had, and maybe, some responsibility needs to be shouldered.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's obviously quite shocking to see that a murderer, a career criminal who actually got his money, like you said, from killing other people, ruining families, ruining people's lives, now going to get an extra €10,000 from us. We're paying him, right? It's not they're not going to pay out of their own salaries, which is absurd. But the sentence itself, it has strong implications. So you can't, it's phone tapping someone's no joke. You can't just decide to tap someone. There's a reason why you have to ask for a warrant, and then that needs to go to the Prime Minister. It's because it's very sensitive, and it's something that law enforcement can get very addicted to. So if you just keep phone tapping everyone, even though he might be a suspect, or you think he might be a suspect, or is related to a suspect, and then it expires, and you keep tapping him, like there are very, very serious privacy and Big Brother concerns. Well, it's unfortunate that De Giorgio had to be the test subject here, but the judgment on the face of it makes sense. I get the logic behind it.
And there's just one small thing I wanted to point out. This happened in February 2017. This was over the period the De Giorgios were allegedly planning the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia. So I wonder how they missed that. So that's another serious question.
They've spoken about over the phone, I don't think.
No. But.
Okay. So you might have, if you were on social media recently, you probably saw this amazing video of two DJs playing CDs Jesu Uahai, a popular church anthem at Liquid, with an image of Jesus blaring in the background. Now, we've spoken to these DJs, and they're basically saying, look, we're surprised it's also controversial. We've done so many things at our parties. It's hilarious that this is what ended up triggering the nation. We did this a while ago as well. And funnily enough, they also brought up the usual hypocrisy of people who pretend to be Catholics, or act or display the Catholicism by saying, "Oh, this is outrageous," but then at the same breath calling for the DJs to be punished, to be attacked, hurt, which goes completely against Catholicism. So they brought that up, which is which says a lot. I mean, I get it, right? It's fun, at a nightclub. People like it. People want to push the envelope a bit. I can't believe this is something that's actually a controversy, but
yeah, no, that's
but it's
that's Malta for you, right? I mean, we removed our blasphemy laws a few years ago, but it still seems people are a bit witch hunting for people who maybe do something that they don't agree with. I mean, just to reiterate, this was a small party of Liquid. According to current rules, maybe 100, 200 people went. All of the people know what they're going for, they know the brand, that they've always done jokes like this, so maybe don't be such a keyboard activist out there, and when you see something, go clutch your pearls, I understand maybe your faith is important to you, and that's completely fine, I understand that, but, some people it's not as important and they're allowed to have some different fun, as in I don't think it's the end of the world. And anyone there who's, out there criticizing, maybe follow the Catholic teaching of, those who haven't done anything to cause the first stone, right? Shouldn't cause the first stone, So we'll see onto that. Onto tonight's events. Prime Minister Robert Abela will deliver his budget speech tonight. This comes a day after the PN's response, which we discussed earlier. Now, if you were to believe everything on the rumour mill, there are suggestions that Robert Abela could use his speech tonight to announce a general election for November 27th. Here at Lovin Malta, we're actually pretty torn on the subject whether it's actually going to happen or not. So let us know in the comments below whether you think an election is going to be called for November. However, there's just like a little small side story happening as well at the same moment. So everyone knows how former Minister Konrad Mitzi didn't go to the Parliamentary Public Accounts Committee. However, now he's changed his mind and said he will be attending tomorrow, saying he's doing so not to avoid the PN disrupting tonight's speech by Prime Minister Robert Abela. We're going to see what happens as well in that PAC. Lovin Malta will be following it live tomorrow, so make sure to follow. Tim, tonight's speech, election, yes or no?
No, I don't think it. I don't know for sure. It's obviously up to him, and he keep hearing different things. But personally, I don't think it's in his interests to call an election now. It might as well, you're so close. Might as well wait a few months. Or like the opposition is gaining ground. You're just way ahead in surveys, unless there's some danger to the economy which you're not telling us about. That's what's going to happen in the next few months. And you know about it, and yet you're pretending everything's rosy, then there's no reason to call an election now. In my opinion, maybe there's something else that is not being said. So we're now going to interview Alexander Tortell. Alexander Tortell is the head of the Intercultural and Antiracism unit within Malta's Human Rights Directorate. And the reason we're bringing him onto the show is because Malta recently launched its new anti-racism strategy, and it's a big problem in Malta. It's a big issue, and we're going to be discussing with Mr. Tortell the implications of this strategy. So stick around for a couple of moments, and we'll bring Mr. Tortell on.
The Taliban's rapid takeover of Afghanistan has brought renewed attention on a topic the EU has so far failed to get a grip of: the migration of asylum seekers. Asylum seeking is a complex issue with many facets that need to be weighed together. The safety of people seeking international protection and the concerns of border countries like Malta, Italy, Spain and many others, who are oftentimes left isolated during this continued crisis. The Arab Spring and the Syrian civil war in 2015 saw massive movement across the Mediterranean. And while numbers have certainly decreased since then, many still die while making their way to safety on European shores. The European Parliament and the EU are doing their best to help, with a €9.88 billion Asylum, Integration and Migration Fund, which has now been boosted because of the situation in Afghanistan. It looks to manage migration flows, ease integration of third country nationals, improve border management, and contribute to the fight against irregular migration. At Parliament's request, the money should also serve to push member states to share responsibility for hosting refugees and asylum seekers more fairly across the EU, something which has been lacking despite calls for solidarity. The fund will also contribute to a common, harmonized visa policy, while also introducing protective measures to help vulnerable people arriving in Europe, in particular unaccompanied children. These are all initiatives that look to balance the major concerns while helping countries like Malta. The Afghan crisis has spurred Parliament to act quickly. Beyond supporting neighbouring countries to help create humanitarian corridors, it is also calling for a special visa programme for Afghan women who are seeking protection from the Taliban regime. However, Parliament made it clear that this cannot replace a fully fledged European asylum and migration policy, which focuses on resettling those most at risk and most vulnerable. It's clear that people need our help, and border countries need all the assistance they can get. The time to come together is now.
Welcome back to Lovin Daily. With me now is Alexander Tortell, head of the Anti-Racism and Integration Unit within the Human Rights Directorate. And Mr. Tortell, thank you for for accepting this interview. As we said before, you launched a strategy, the anti-racism strategy for 2021 to 2023. So that means 2 years from now. So can you explain the main points of this strategy and what realistically can be achieved within the next 2 years?
So first of all, thank you for having me on the show. This is the first anti-racism strategy. So an anti-racism strategy, or under some name or other, exists in many member states, and it's basically a comprehensive 360 approach to the problem of racism and xenophobia, coming at it from different areas. And this is what our strategy aims to do. We're looking at different measures to address the areas of concern. So the areas of concern are having more research on what racism and hate speech are in Malta, what the extent is, where we find it. We're addressing how to educate children, especially to become anti-racist. So not just having saying, look, racism is bad, but actively becoming anti-racist, and addressing other areas of governance where racism might be prevalent. It's also bringing in what we call a whole of society approach. So the social partners, the media, the political parties, addressing the data gathering. So this is just giving a small taste of what it is. It's a comprehensive approach. You mentioned rightly that this is a 2-year plan. Most of the strategies like this, to some extent, the first couple of years are a pilot project of understanding what the situation is in Malta. This is the first, hopefully, of others in the future. But in these 2 years, one of the key things that we will be doing is, first of all, giving a clear message that racism is not okay, that hate speech is illegal, that we need to talk about it, and we need to bring together a lot of initiatives that are already happening together and fronting the problem of racism in a strong, robust way, and at the same time learning what is specifically needed in the Maltese context.
So is it something that the European Union is obliging us to do, or is it something that the Maltese government recognized as a problem and decided to take this on its own initiative?
Look, actually we started working on this and probably at the same time that the EU was putting together its own EU anti-racism action plan. So it's not a legal requirement, but that's a bit besides the point, because racism does exist everywhere, and this type of plan actually is more of an approach in a specific context, which then involves legislation at the local and EU level. So yes, there's a EU anti-racism action plan, which is a really useful tool, which was launched in September 2020. It's a really useful tool because it recognizes that racism is not just a problem that stops at the borders. Mm-hmm. It goes beyond borders. It goes beyond even European borders, as the Black Lives Matter movement shows. At the same time, our plan, the EU action plan, the Black Lives Matter movement.
Stop you there. What's your assessment of Black Lives Matter? Because it's obviously grown in popularity over the years. There has been some criticism of it, but it's also been recognized for implementing change. So
look, my assessment, Tim, is that it spurred a lot of action, and in some cases it continued it. it's also saying that the reality is that discrimination exists. You know, I mean, and we need to tackle it. Racism exists, xenophobia exists, and we need to talk about them. I'm optimistic that talking about it, educating, supporting people to understand what this really is. You know, it's basically, let's get rid of hate from our society. Basically, that's what I think. I think if you put it in those terms, you might certainly find a few people who disagree. But I believe that ultimately, society as a whole, we all believe that all forms of hate should be stamped out. You know, now the method how to do it is what we think is outlined in there is how we think we have a reasonably good chance of getting there.
Okay, so Lovin, there was recently Malta was here with a case of Lovin Jaiter. Lovin Jaiter was is a construction worker who was injured at his place of work and was left on a pavement by his employer rather than being sent to hospital. And we spoke to his nephew actually after this, not just about his case, but about what it's like living as an African migrant in Malta. And he spoke of systemic, even racist abuses at the workplace, you know, constant. Not only do people look down on you and treat you as a second or third class citizen, but also your employer can hover this over your head, the fact that he can make you do what he wants, because the moment the moment your work permit expires, you have to leave the country. So what would this strategy have done for someone like Lovin to prevent the incident from happening to him?
That's a really super question, Tim. Look, as I said in the launch events, I mean, this event was appalling and utterly condemnable from all points of view. The thing is that racism does not become a flood of hate suddenly. It's a drip of tolerating a comment here, a racist joke here, stereotypes, prejudices, and suddenly you get a case like the one you mentioned, or as the murder of Lassana 2 years ago, which actually was the reason for this plan. We started really actively working on it at that point. So it's basically putting in place a prevention to that tolerance to hate, you know, and people do not wake up suddenly in one morning and decide to become racist. We have been there's a dehumanization going on, a process of accepting what we should not be accepting. And I think that this is the point of a strategy like this here in Malta and at EU level and in other member states. Let's call out racism when we see it, and just as we have a zero tolerance to other forms of hatred and discrimination, let's make sure that this also becomes part of our culture. So that what unfortunately happened to these two cases and to many others which we don't know about, because it's sometimes invisible. Let's put a stop to it, you know.
And thank you for that. And finally, what would your message be to someone who might feel they are suffering or experiencing racism themselves, or are witnessing a case of racism? Not to them, but to someone else. What's your message to people like this?
Look, we have a problem of underreporting. Underreporting means that it is the problem of racism is invisible. So one should report to the institutions, to police, NCPE, and to us, Human Rights Directorate, and and take action. You know, when abuse, harassment, illegal behavior is not addressed, and bullying based on racist grounds, not just with foreigners, with migrants, but even we have this diversity in our families now, because I mean, it's this is not just an issue of my report. You know, speak up. There are loads of NGOs also working in the field. I think it's really important to give a voice to what so far has been mostly invisible, and then which explodes in our faces, like what happened in Melliha.
Mr. Alexander Tortell, thank you
for
much
having
for
me.
accepting this interview. I think it was really interesting and very important work being done over here. And that's it from us for today. Make sure you follow lovinmaltas.com for all the latest developments, and have an evening full of love.